Welcome back to another great video with the majestic host for Savior, and today I'm very excited and I have a lot to say about Daoism and the philosophy of Daoism, how to be a Daoist in modern times and how to live as a Daoist, and explaining exactly what this philosophy is because a lot of people don't truly understand it. And before I get into all of this, I've done so much research into this philosophy, and I will be giving, my own perspective on this philosophy because Daoist teachings are very fractal, okay? They are very divergent just simply because of the nature of this philosophy. I wouldn't say philosophies like Buddhism or Stoicism are simple by any means, but they do have more linear guidance, I would say, on what is the correct form of that philosophy to practice. Of course, we always get different schools and different branching paths of philosophy, but I just think it's worth noting that Daoism is very metaphysical with its teachings, and it is down to your own perspective. So today I want to discuss what is Daoism and how to be a Daoist in modern times, how you can take the Daoist teachings and enrich your life. It's something I feel very passionate about after reading Tao Te Ching. Daoism has really made me ground myself a lot more. It's a very grounding philosophy and a way of living, and it can be a religious experience as well, if you view the context of the universal law as, being a god, which many do, but you don't have to take inspiration and to take the lessons out of Daoism. You don't need to be religious for it, and it's not actually a religious text whatsoever. And also, before we start, I will just quickly say that this is going to be the teachings of the Tao and the Daoist philosophy, but also mixed in with my own personal philosophy that I'm trying to create at the moment, the R.U.E.R thought movement that I have created on this channel, and it's a book that I'm working on at the moment. I haven't thought of the name of it, but I'm taking inspirations from many different forms of philosophy, from Stoicism, from Daoism, deontology, Hegel, Plato, the Stoic philosophy, the Buddha philosophy, and Daoist philosophy. I'm taking many different forms of inspiration to create something new. So if you do like philosophical content as well as gaming videos, that's what we do here. So make sure that you do subscribe to the channel, join this fantastic wise community, become a wise one today. Don't be like the 99% of dum-dums, and don't watch goddamn AI-driven intellectual content, which will literally rot your brain and you will get misinformation. Support real creators. Consider supporting me, dropping a donation if you find any of this stuff useful. It would mean a lot to me because I put everything that I am into this content. I work so hard on it. I spent way too long researching the topics, making sure that I get the right information out to you guys. And I have recently gone full-time on YouTube, so I would appreciate it if you do support the show by dropping a donation or checking out the music that I create on Spotify. It's very difficult to go full-time on YouTube at the moment as a real human person, that's right, so any support is appreciated. So the Daoist philosophy comes from, the main source that it comes from is Tao Te Ching, which is an ancient text of Chinese descent, and basically what this book is about, what this book teaches us, is like the universal law. It's not so much laws and principles you have to follow like you would in Stoic philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, for example. It's more of a way of living, and a lot of old philosophies, and that's how we should live as philosophers, is living the life of a philosopher, not just reading it and preaching it as an academic subject, but actually living it. Daoism really embodies that sentiment of living that philosophy, living that life, okay? And it is very interesting because it does draw many parallels with Stoic philosophy, because Stoicism is all about living in accordance with nature, and following the natural law. And in a way, Taoism is about that same thing. Taoism reminds me a lot of something like Shinto and the philosophy of Shinto, because it's more of a way of acting and being, within existence itself, instead of following exact principles. And Lao Tzu, the guy who might have existed, he might not have, he might just be a divine figure, but the practices and teachings from Tao Te Ching is all about how to connect with that, original consciousness. It's the idea that we all come from a single point, that we are all actually connected, and we are all part of the same thing. And it's very interesting because when you're a child, your mind isn't fully developed, so you are much more... You can tap into that world space, you can tap into that metaphysical world space even more, kind of mixing, what exactly is a reality, a defined reality. And I'm not talking about a reality shaped by society, but I'm talking about the perception of reality that we humans have, and how that changes over time. And Taoism often refers to water as, a kind of reference point for what they're trying to teach. So the idea of this universal law is basically, it's a source of creation, and this source, this divine power, whatever you want to call it, this creates everything. This creates the universe. This creates the very electrons, atoms, particles, everything that we see in our objective reality, it creates. And because we are created from that same source, we are basically the same as the Tao, okay? We are part of that greater being, that greater existence. And by having that same mentality, and Buddhism, kind of shares some, of that same idea of rebirth and all that kind of stuff, we are essentially all the same, and we all come from the same thing. So it brings the sense of empathy and understanding. And I think that is a good baseline to have within any philosophy, this kind of dualist state of metaphysics, because it makes sense to me personally. And when you deconstruct everything that is created within the universe, and human beings included, it makes sense that we all come from the same original source. So just like the background radiation, or the Big Bang, or the kind of heat death of the universe and the reconstruction of the universe, everything follows a cycle, everything follows natural law, and we as human beings are powerless against it. So it's about tapping into that source of understanding that you are a part of nature. You aren't separate from nature or the universe or anything, really. And your ego and your persona, your identity, is simply a construct. Construct? You are simply a construct. Human beings create an ego, and the ego creates a persona and a construct. But at its source, we are all fundamentally the same, and we all come from the same, being. That is the great Tao, the universe, okay? And that's a very important principle to understand, and that lays the foundation for many philosophies, not just Taoism, and I think that is key to having greater understanding and taking yourself less serious. Now, Taoism teaches the principles of Wu-Wei, which is basically a way of being and a way of acting, okay? And it also deals with the idea of Yin and Yang, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. Yin and Yang teaches that we can't have one thing without the other. We can't have darkness, for example, without light, without that contrast, without that comparison. And it's not just a simple language description of, one thing and another thing. It's a fundamental law of nature. Something can't exist without the other. We can't have this conscious experience without the universe existing in the first place. It's a dualist state of existence and creation, and again, that taps into the source, which is the Tao. Taoism is about accepting everything as it comes, as the natural law, because, like I said, you can't have one thing without the other, so we can't have pleasure without discomfort. and it's irrational to seek only pleasure and then, run away from discomfort, okay? They're bound to coexist at some point in time. You have to accept nature and live in accordance with nature, and by, running away from that idea of being a part of nature, being a part of this universe is irrational, and actually that detaches you more from the universal law, and it's just a way of your ego to protect itself. Taoism is often also about simple living, simple actions, okay? In this modern day society, this consumer capitalist society, we are very focused on achieving, okay? And we have now transitioned into an achievement-based society where you are deemed worthy based on what you produce, your actions and your job title, all of this stuff. But Taoism is more of an answer to what we should really be focusing on. Instead of this false narrative, this false fabricated society that we, are conditioned into by, the educational system or by your parents or whoever it is, by society, that, you have to achieve something in order to be deemed worthwhile. Taoism is, again, returning to the roots of being what you are, a natural, simple, biological animal, and basically your actions and your thoughts should reflect that. Everything should be simple. Everything should be a process instead of an outcome. That's a very simplistic way of breaking down Daoist thinking, but I think that helps you understand a little bit about it. Daoist philosophy focuses on living in harmony with the Tao, the fundamental natural order of the universe, okay? And through balance and effortless action, that's what Daoist philosophy preaches about, living in accordance with that universal law and not overthinking your actions, but just by simply tapping into them. A good example is the flow state, okay? For example, when I make music and when I really get into making that music, the reason why I don't want to commercialize it too much is because I enjoy that flow state. I enjoy being a part of that music, becoming a part of the song. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's just what it is. It's the same for people who, do writing or painting. When you get into that flow state, you stop analyzing and overthinking, and your consciousness becomes focused. And Taoism is all about returning to that original state of, understanding and the natural order of what it is to be an animal. Because we as human beings, we like to overthink. We like to, live in the past or live in the future, two states of time dimension that does not actually exist to us at the moment with this perception. That's the kind of curse of having higher consciousness, but Taoism is about returning to the universal root of what we all are, what we all share in common, because we all come from the same thing, and we aren't actually different whatsoever. It's simply an illusion that we are all actually separate. We might have different, chemistry or different thoughts and beliefs, but the original consciousness is all part of the same universal law. At least that's my own personal take on the Daoist philosophy. But it only really talks about is returning to that fundamental, law of nature, okay? Effortless action, though, is key to understanding Daoist philosophy, R.U.E.R, okay? And in my research, I thought that this was kind of similar to the idea of Hegel's dialectics. Hegel's dialectics, if you don't know, involves the process of thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, okay? Where contradictions and different ideas basically are resolved to achieve higher understanding and new ideas. And Daoist philosophy, in a way, is kind of about achieving that same goal, especially with the principles of Yin and Yang. Like I said, you can't have one idea without the other contradiction or opposite. So the Daoist philosophy is about understanding and tapping into that sense of oneness that you can get through meditation. And there's a reason why consciousness can reach that point. It's not, a simple mind trick. It is because you're tapping into the metaphysical, which isn't, something that exists in the physical reality. So the Tao, which translates to the way, okay, it's basically understanding that we are in a constant flux, we are in constant change. There is only the now, but the now is constant change. And, that is my own personal philosophy, but mixing in with the teachings of the Tao. And like I said, it's that principle of the universal law and living in accordance with nature, which is very similar to the Stoics' idea of living in harmony with nature as well. Basically, by, detaching ourselves from nature, which is what modern society has done, we cease to understand, basic ideas and moral virtue and values. And this is what causes a lot of problems in modern day society, because we are constantly, in need for something, desires or external validation, all of this stuff. But returning to the source of, we are all just the same thing. We are all simply matter, and we all come from the universal. A great way to practice Taoism without really realizing you're practicing it is trying to do something that you absolutely care about or value, and getting into that flow state. Whatever it is that you find absolute fulfillment in, and when you can focus completely and you don't even realize that time is passing. If you can get that, then you're tapping into the Tao, you're tapping into that flow existence. And in a modern day society where we are always trying to do more, we are always trying to chase the next thing, the grass is always greener. But the Daoist philosophy, the ancient teachings of R.U.E.R, for example, say that, we should not want for anything and kind of have an empty mind. Basically, we have to let go of categories and, fundamental truths that we perceive to be real, but that's only because of our limited perception from a society that only has a tiny perception. So interestingly enough, there are 3 different ways to practice Daoist philosophy, okay? We have the kind of physical practice, the Yang Shen, okay? And excuse me if I'm butchering the pronunciation. Like I said, I did, crazy ramblings of a madman, but it makes sense in my mind. Yang Shen is a form of movement, kind of similar to yoga, and basically it's just, tapping into the now and the kind of flow state and that idea of simple living and, returning to kind of base consciousness instead of the ego consciousness and the ego mind. Also, we have, surprisingly, this might sound a little bit out there, and that is alchemy. Yes, that sounds like magic, but Taoism, old ancient Taoism, they do also use a form of alchemy, like mental alchemy, which is a form of deep meditations and spiritual journeys that you can go on, which I highly recommend, but also physical alchemy, like creating from raw organic materials, that can also help kind of cleanse you, which isn't actually completely scientifically baseless, because we know that a good diet really can make all the difference with your life. So it's very interesting, because Tao Te Ching, the book, is not so much a set of rules or principles, like I said. It's more like a set of riddles or a set of puzzles, a set of sayings that you have to figure out yourself. That's what makes it so interesting. Kind of like, poetry in some ways. A lot of it might sound like a paradox to begin with, but the more you look deeper into yourself and understand that base original consciousness idea and tap into that source, then it makes more sense. You just have to be philosophically minded and go into it with an open mind and let go of your attachments, which, like I said, you can start by practicing something simple like Stoicism to get into that mindset. But funny enough, towards the end of Tao Te Ching, it talks a lot about how to, basically rule, and, it talks about how to be a great leader, which is something I find very fascinating as I want to create my own philosophy and my own community. But it also shares ideas similar with Plato's Republic, where it talks about a leader should be a philosopher king, a king philosopher. And I think that does make the most sense, because only a wise man who doesn't seek power can actually lead the people, instead of someone who seeks power and desire and is completely the opposite of the original consciousness and the universal, and it's just pure ego and greed. So it makes sense to me, but it's just something I thought I would mention. So a good analogy that summarizes Tao Te Ching and the philosophy of Taoism is, I can't remember the exact story, okay, I will put in some quotes now and then, but basically the idea is, I think it was Lao Tzu or maybe someone else, but they were sleeping, okay, and they had a dream that they were a butterfly, a magical little butterfly, yes. And it was a beautiful dream. They were completely free, without human worry, all of this stuff. And sometimes, if you're like me, you know what it's like to have a very vivid dream. And it feels completely 100% real until you wake up. I've, had dreams where I've met a complete stranger and I've fallen in love with them. The sense of love that I feel is actually real. And then when you wake up and you realize you're never going to see them again, it's pretty painful. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. For people who do have vivid dreams. But the idea of that is, when he wakes up, was he a human dreaming about being a butterfly, or was he a butterfly dreaming about being a human? And I know that sounds rather out there and rather like, ooh, that's just fantasy. But you have to understand, human beings are wired to be focused on the objective reality that we perceive in front of us right now. But you have to understand, we can perceive just such a tiny amount of the physical world around us, the metaphysical world around us. When you understand just how giant and vast the universe is, and how much we, don't understand, and how our perceptions are limited by just 5 pathetic senses, you will understand that it is all just a matter of perception. And that is what Taoism teaches us. It is about letting go of that idea and becoming more one with the universal law of nature and not fighting it. Again, it reaches towards that idea of the flow state and that idea of original consciousness in which we all came from, especially if you do believe in things like rebirth or cycles, for example, then this isn't really a difficult concept for you to understand. And if you're religious, perhaps, that also makes sense to you. If you're a pure atheist or just a skeptic in life, and you need hard science data, that's perfectly fine as well. I believe that is a valid way of living life, and we need the objective reality that we can perceive in order to, progress humanity and make sense of the world rationally. But you have to understand that this can only take you so far, and just, holding on to your egoic, I don't know if that's a word, but just holding on to your ego and the perception of that ego limits you massively. And returning to original consciousness, the simple state, the simple ways of living, doing everything slowly, not desiring more, not, expecting anything from any action that you do, that is a true master of Daoist philosophy. Living without expecting anything, pretty much, and taking pleasure in the slow acts of life, being like water, being still, turning down great power for a simple life, because that way life can be more fulfilling, actually, instead of, having all of these attachments to externals. Understanding that everything is simply a state shift, that we are constantly shifting states of existence, okay? For example, when you go to sleep at night, you are shifting from a different state to another state, the subconscious. The same when you die, the same when you're born, the same as you grow and develop into the person you are today. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? There's a small part of you that is the same, but not really, because your ideas and your thoughts and everything changes, because the universe is a constant flux of change. Understanding that, letting go, is being a true Taoist master. That is my perspective. That is what I've learned from the teachings of Taoism and Daoist philosophy, and I wanted to share that with you today. I'm very passionate about this subject and all philosophy in general, and I think understanding this and sharing these teachings might help you to break away from the modernity of this world, where we are always trying to seek the next best thing. We are always trying to reach higher. We always want material wealth or validation or success. And society puts so much pressure on us for this hustle culture, for working 9-to-5 jobs, doing the right thing in the eyes of society. But actually, this is not the correct way of living in accordance with the universal nature and what we are as simple animal biological beings. Becoming a Taoist master takes time and practice, but I think it is still important to learn about it, do research about it yourself, and see how you can implement it in your modern day life. And perhaps you can look at your emotions and why you take things so seriously, or what things you need to let go of, ways to improve your person and be kinder to other people perhaps. Taoism is a philosophy, a way of living that makes life simpler, but with greater understanding. Because, like the small example of yin and yang, you can't have, life without suffering, and you can't have suffering without life. But understanding this, you can get through life perhaps a little bit easier. And by living in accordance with the natural law, you aren't adding anything artificial onto it. You are just living in that pure state of existence. And if you can master something joyous and something useful, and you dedicate your time to that, that's where you can access the flow state. That's where you can access that greater understanding. Taking your time is not a bad thing. Doing things at your own pace without other people's judgments affecting you, that is being a true master, and that is living in accordance with the Tao. I do hope you enjoyed this philosophical video explaining what is Taoism, Taoism explained, how to live like a Taoist in modern times. It was something I felt very passionate about, something I needed to talk about, and expect more philosophical videos to come. And I really hope you did give this video a chance and that you share it around. I would appreciate that a lot, as I'm trying to create something real here. I'm trying to share innovative and interesting new ideas to shape my own philosophy, which will be released publicly at some point. And we need to support human innovation and ideas, and not this artificial world. And I just appreciate your support, your time for watching this video. And if you did like it, please do consider dropping a small donation to support the show so I can keep doing this. And yeah, stay wise and look after yourself, and have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.